Welcome to my channel.
And this is English Podcast Station.
Okay, so you know how it is when you're prepping for the IELTS exam and it feels like time just disappears?
Yeah, totally.
Right? It's like weeks or even months can go by, and sometimes you're not even sure where to start.
Exactly.
That's exactly what we're diving into today on this deep dive. Staying productive during your IELTS prep.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, you're not just learning English for fun, right? You're trying to hit a specific score for university or for work or for immigration, whatever your big goal is.
Exactly. So it's not just about like casually picking up some new words here and there.
Yeah.
You actually need to make serious progress.
Fast.
So we're going to look at how to study smarter, not just harder, how to make the absolute most of the time you have.
Yeah, because you've got those 4 big skills to tackle, right? Listening, reading, writing, speaking, and they all need serious attention.
They do, and it's easy to get bogged down in one area and then completely neglect another.
Oh yeah, and then there's the whole procrastination thing. We've all been there.
Oh my gosh, procrastination is like the IELTS student's worst enemy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, who wants to sit down and write a practice essay when you could be watching cat videos on YouTube?
Right, or scrolling through social media. That's a huge one.
It's the worst, and then your motivation dips because you feel like you're not getting anywhere.
The motivation roller coaster, it's real.
It is, and then there's distractions everywhere. You turn your phone, your family, your own thoughts even.
It can feel impossible to just sit down and focus.
Yeah, and a lot of people end up just studying without any real plan. They just kind of open a book and hope for the best.
Yeah, I've totally been there, just flipping through pages, feeling lost.
Exactly, and that's why we're here to give you some actual strategies that you can use right now to get the most out of your IELTS prep.
Okay, so let's get into it. What does it even mean to be productive when it comes to IELTS? It's not just about the hours you put in.
Right, definitely not. It's about the results you get.
So it's about quality over quantity.
Exactly. Think of it this way. You could spend like 5 hours just reading random articles in English. But if you're not actively learning new words or trying to figure out the grammar structures that are actually used in the IELTS,
Right.
then are you really making progress towards your goal? Probably not.
So it's about maximizing what you learn and minimize wasting time.
Exactly. It's about being efficient and focused with your energy.
Okay, so how do we actually do that?
Well, first we got to talk about the mental game.
Right, the mental game.
Because motivation is what gets you started and keeps you going.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And focus, that's what lets you really absorb the information you're studying.
Right, it's like if your mind is all over the place, you're not going to remember anything.
Exactly. And then there's time management. That's how you make sure you're actually using your time wisely.
So it's like a 3-legged stool: motivation, focus, and time management.
Yeah, you need all 3 to really be productive.
Okay, so let's talk about motivation. How do we stay motivated when IELTS prep can feel like such a grind?
Well, one really effective way is to set SMART goals.
SMART goals. Okay, I've heard of those, but remind me what they are again.
So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Okay, so break that down for me. What does that actually look like for an IELTS student?
Sure. So let's say your goal is to improve your writing score, right? That's a good starting point, but it's not very specific.
Okay.
A specific goal would be something like, I want to increase my band score on IELTS writing task 2 essays by half a band.
Okay, that's much more specific.
And then measurable, that means you need a way to actually track your progress.
So you could keep track of your scores on practice essays, for example.
Exactly. And then achievable. So your goal needs to be realistic given how much time you have to study and your current English level.
Right, so don't set yourself up for failure by aiming for like a 2-band jump in a week.
Exactly. Small steps lead to big progress. And then relevant, your goal should be directly connected to your overall IELTS goals.
So if you need a certain writing score for university, then yeah, focus on writing.
Exactly. Don't waste time on stuff that's not going to help you reach your main goal. And then finally, time bound.
So give yourself a deadline.
Yeah, exactly. So a SMART goal for writing could be something like, I will improve my average band score on IELTS writing task 2 practice essays by half a band within the next 4 weeks by focusing on improving my arguments and using a wider range of vocabulary.
Okay, that's a really good example. I can see how that would make things feel less overwhelming.
It's all about breaking down your big goal into smaller, manageable steps.
Now, once we have our SMART goals, how do we manage all those daily study tasks? How do we prioritize what to work on each day?
That's where good time management comes in. You need to be able to look at your to-do list and figure out what's actually important.
So not just what's urgent, but what's going to actually make a difference in my score.
Exactly. Sometimes you might have to say no to something that feels urgent, like responding to emails or whatever.
Right, because those things can eat up your time.
They can, and they might not actually be as important as, let's say, practicing a full reading test.
So it's about being ruthless with your time and focusing on the tasks that are really going to move the needle.
Exactly, and that also means being honest with yourself about where your time is going.
Okay, so like tracking how much time I'm actually spending on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly, because we all have those time wasters, those things that suck up our time without giving us much in return.
Like Netflix or YouTube rabbit holes.
Oh yeah, those are the worst.
So once we've identified those time wasters, how do we actually create a study schedule that works for our lives?
Well, first you got to be realistic, Ray.
Okay, realistic.
Look at your current commitments, work, family, social life, and figure out how much time you can actually dedicate to IELTS prep each week.
Don't try to cram in like 20 hours of studying if you just don't have the time.
Exactly. And once you have that overall time estimate, then you can start blocking off specific times for each skill: listening, reading, writing, speaking.
So instead of just saying, I'll study English for 2 hours today, it's better to say, okay, from 9 to 10, I'm doing listening practice.
Exactly. That's time blocking, and it's super effective because it helps you stay focused.
Okay, because you know exactly what you should be doing at that specific time.
Exactly. No more wasted time trying to figure out what to study next. And then another really important thing is to schedule in breaks.
Breaks.
Yeah, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but your brain actually needs time to rest and process information.
Okay, so I shouldn't just be trying to power through hours and hours of studying without stopping.
No, definitely not. You'll just burn yourself out.
Right.
Even short breaks, like 5 or 10 minutes every hour, can make a big difference.
So like get up, stretch, make a cup of tea.
Exactly. And there's a technique called the Pomodoro technique, where you work for 25 minutes, then take a 5-minute break.
Okay, so you're kind of breaking down your study time into these focused intervals.
Exactly. And it really helps with concentration.
Okay, now speaking of breaks, how do we balance all this studying with the rest of our lives?
That's the $1,000,000 question, right?
It is, because it's important to still have a life outside of IELTS prep.
Totally. You don't want to become a hermit who only talks about grammar rules.
No, exactly. So how do we strike that balance?
Well, it's all about being mindful of your time and energy. Make sure you're still scheduling in time for things you enjoy, hobbies, friends, family, exercise.
Okay, so it's not just about studying all the time.
No, definitely not. You need to recharge your batteries so you can come back to your studies feeling refreshed.
And I guess life happens, right? Things come up unexpectedly. So our study schedule shouldn't be set in stone.
Exactly. Be flexible.
So if something comes up, or if I realize I need to spend more time on one particular skill, I can adjust my schedule.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to adapt. It's your schedule. It should work for you.
Okay, so we've talked about goals and schedules now. Let's talk about where we actually do this studying. Does our environment really matter that much?
Oh, yeah. It matters a lot. Think about it. Have you ever tried to study in a noisy coffee shop?
Oh yeah, it's impossible to focus.
Right. Your environment can either help or hinder your productivity.
Okay, so what makes a good study environment?
Well, first of all, it needs to be quiet and free from distractions.
So no TV, no loud music.
No, definitely not turn off your phone notifications, or even better, put your phone in another room.
Oh, I like that idea, because my phone is like a black hole of distraction.
It is for most of us.
And what about the physical space itself?
Make sure it's comfortable.
Okay, so good lighting, a comfy chair.
Exactly. You don't want to be hunched over a tiny desk with a crick in your neck.
No, definitely not. And what about keeping things organized?
Oh, that's super important. You don't want to be wasting time searching for your notes or your textbook.
Right, it's like having a clear workspace equals a clear mind.
Exactly. Keep your study materials organized and easily accessible.
Now, we've talked about minimizing distractions, but what about technology? Can we use technology to our advantage?
Absolutely. There are tons of great language learning apps and online resources that can be really helpful.
Okay, but I guess the key is to use them in a focused way.
Exactly. Don't let them become another distraction.
So like maybe use a vocabulary app during a specific time block, but then turn off the notifications when you're doing other things.
Exactly. Be intentional about how you use technology.
And you mentioned making your study space comfortable, but can the actual look and feel of the space impact our productivity?
It can. You know, if your study space feels inspiring and positive, it can actually make you want to study more.
Interesting. So it's like creating a space that you actually enjoy being in.
Exactly. Maybe add some plants or some artwork, or make sure you have good natural light.
Okay, so a dedicated, quiet, organized, and comfortable space. That's the ideal study setup.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about how we actually study. Are all study methods created equal?
Definitely not. There's a big difference between active and passive learning.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So passive learning is like just reading through your notes or listening to a lecture without really engaging with the material.
Okay, so it's kind of like just hoping that the information will magically seep into your brain.
Yeah, but unfortunately it doesn't really work that way.
Okay, and active learning is the opposite.
Exactly. Active learning means you're actively participating in the learning process.
So how can we do that for IELTS?
Well, for reading and listening, you could try summarizing the main ideas after you finish a passage or a recording.
Okay.
Or you could try explaining it to someone else or even just to yourself.
Interesting. So it's about putting the information into your own words.
Exactly. And for writing, you could focus on planning your essays before you start writing.
Okay, so really thinking about the structure and the arguments you want to make.
Exactly. And then for speaking, you could practice speaking on a variety of topics and record yourself so you can hear how you sound.
Okay, and then I can analyze my own speaking and see where I need to improve.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive and taking control of your learning.
We talked about the Pomodoro technique earlier as a way to manage our time, but can it also be an effective study technique?
It can, because those focused intervals help you stay concentrated.
Okay, so you're kind of training your brain to focus for those 25-minute bursts.
Exactly. And then the short breaks help you recharge so you can come back feeling refreshed.
Okay, now building vocabulary is a huge part of IELTS. So are there specific techniques for learning new words more effectively?
Absolutely. And two of the most effective techniques are spaced repetition and active recall.
Okay, remind me what those are again.
So spaced repetition basically means reviewing new words at increasing intervals.
Okay, so like maybe review them the next day, then again a week later, then a month later.
Exactly. It helps move the information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory.
Oh, that's cool.
And then active recall is all about forcing yourself to retrieve information from your memory.
So like looking at a word and trying to remember the definition without peeking at your notes.
Exactly. You can use flashcards for this, or even just cover up the definition and try to recall it.
That sounds like a good way to really test yourself.
It is, and it's much more effective than just passively reading through a vocabulary list.
Okay, now what about organizing our thoughts, especially for the writing and speaking sections?
Mind maps are really helpful for that.
Okay, tell me more about mind maps.
So it's basically a diagram where you start with a central idea and then branch out with related concepts.
Okay, so it's like a visual way to brainstorm and organize your thoughts.
Exactly. You can use it for planning your essays or for brainstorming ideas for the speaking test.
That's a good idea. I'm going to try that. And what about studying with other people? Is that helpful?
It can be explaining things to others can actually help you understand them better yourself.
Oh yeah, I've noticed that sometimes when I try to explain something to someone else,
Yeah.
I realize I don't actually understand it as well as I thought I did.
Exactly. And you can also learn from your peers. They might know some vocabulary or grammar rules that you don't.
So it's kind of like a win-win situation.
It is. And it can also be more motivating to study with someone else. It keeps you accountable.
Okay, so active learning, spaced repetition, mind maps, collaborative study. So those are all great techniques.
They are.
But what about just staying focused during those study sessions? I know I personally struggle with that a lot.
Yeah, focus is a skill that you have to develop over time.
So how do we train our brains to focus better?
Well, first of all, make sure you're managing your mental fatigue.
Okay, so enough sleep, regular breaks.
Exactly. And you can also try incorporating some relaxation techniques into your day.
Like meditation or deep breathing exercises.
Exactly. Even just a few minutes of mindfulness can make a big difference.
Okay, so it's about being present in the moment and clearing your mind.
Exactly. And you can also try gradually increasing the length of your study sessions.
So start small and then slowly build up your stamina.
Exactly. It's like training for a marathon. You wouldn't just go out and run 26 miles on your first day.
No, definitely not. Now, what about those moments when procrastination strikes? How do we deal with that?
Well, the first step is to try and figure out why you're procrastinating.
Okay, so is it because I'm feeling overwhelmed, or is it because I just don't want to do this particular task?
Exactly. Once you know the reason, you can start to find solutions.
So if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I could try breaking down the task into smaller chunks.
Exactly. Make it feel less daunting.
And if I'm just avoiding a task because I don't enjoy it.
Well, sometimes you just got to power through it, but you can also try to make it more enjoyable.
So like put on some music or find a study buddy.
Exactly. And of course, minimize those distractions.
Put the phone away. Close the social media tabs.
Exactly. Create an environment that's conducive to focus.
And how do we stay motivated over the long term when the exam feels far away?
Setting those SMART goals is really helpful because it gives you something concrete to work towards.
Right, and then you can track your progress and see how far you've come.
Exactly. And it's also helpful to visualize your success. Imagine yourself achieving your desired score and how that will feel.
Okay, so like really picture myself getting that acceptance letter from my dream university.
Exactly. And don't forget to reward yourself for your progress.
So like if I hit a milestone, I can treat myself to something nice.
Exactly. Positive reinforcement goes a long way.
Okay, so we've talked about goals, schedules, environments, study techniques, motivation, focus, procrastination.
We've covered a lot.
We have. Now let's talk about tracking our progress. Why is it so important to do this?
Because it helps you stay motivated. It helps you identify your strengths and weaknesses, and it helps you adjust your study plan as needed.
Okay, so it's like having a roadmap for your IELTS journey.
Exactly. You can see where you're at, where you need to go, and how you're going to get there.
So how do we actually track our progress?
Well, you can start by setting benchmarks and milestones based on your SMART goals.
Okay, so like if my goal is to improve my writing score by half a band in 4 weeks.
Then you could set a benchmark of improving by a quarter band in 2 weeks.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then there are lots of tracking tools and apps available that can help you monitor your progress.
Okay, I've seen those apps that can track your vocabulary and your practice test scores.
Exactly. Those can be really helpful. And of course, the most important thing is to regularly analyze your performance on practice tests.
Okay, so don't just take the test and then forget about it. Really dig into the results and see where I made mistakes.
Exactly. Identify your weak areas so you can focus on improving them.
And I guess it's also important to celebrate our achievements along the way.
Absolutely. Acknowledge your progress, no matter how small it might seem.
Right. Give yourself a pat on the back and stay motivated.
Exactly. And then finally, make sure you're regularly reviewing your overall goals and your study plan.
So make sure everything is still relevant and aligned with my needs.
Yes, exactly. Because as you progress, you might find that you need to adjust your focus or your strategies.
Okay, so to sum it all up, what are the key takeaways from today's deep dive?
Okay, so remember, productivity is about working smarter, not harder.
Okay.
Set clear SMART goals, create a realistic study schedule, optimize your environment, actively engage with the material use, effective study techniques, stay focused, stay motivated, and track your progress.
Wow, that's a lot to remember, but it all makes sense.
It does, and the most important thing is to just start taking action.
Right, pick 1 or 2 things that you can implement this week and see what happens.
Exactly, experiment and see what works best for you.
I love that advice, and for our listeners, I challenge you to think about this. How can you apply even just one of these productivity strategies to your IELTS prep this week?
Yeah, what small change can you make that will have a big impact?
It's all about taking those small steps consistently, and before you know it, you'll be well on your way to achieving your IELTS goals. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Next time.
Bye.